The grand wedding hall was filled with soft murmurs and rustling silk as guests took their seats. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that only a wedding day could bring. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm glow on the rows of white chairs adorned with delicate flowers. Everyone waited for the music, for the moment that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. But when the music finally swelled and Emma appeared, walking alone down the aisle, a hush fell over the room. No father escorting her, no groom waiting at the altar. Just Emma, her shoulders straight but her hands trembling, clutching a bouquet that seemed too bright for the sadness in her eyes. She moved slowly, her white gown brushing softly against the polished floor, every step measured and uncertain. The silence was heavy, broken only by the faint sniffles of a few guests and the quiet clicking of cameras. The empty seat beside the groom's place was a glaring absence that no one could ignore. Whispers quickly spread like wildfire. Where was the groom? Why was Emma walking alone? The joy of the day had suddenly shifted into something fragile, something raw and unexplained. Emma's heart pounded inside her chest as if trying to escape the cage of her ribs. Her mind raced back to the morning, to the frantic phone calls and unanswered texts. Her fiancé, Mark, had vanished without a word. No explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. The panic had set in immediately. First disbelief, then a desperate hope that he would still show up before the ceremony. But as the hours slipped by, that hope faded into a cold certainty that something had gone terribly wrong. Now, here she was, standing in front of everyone she loved, alone. Her breath caught, and a tear threatened to fall, but she blinked it away fiercely. Emma had made a decision. She would not let this day, this moment, be stolen by heartbreak or betrayal. She would walk down that aisle, not because the groom was there, but because she was strong enough to face whatever came next. Her family watched with a mixture of pride and pain, unable to hide their own tears. Friends exchanged uncertain looks, some nodding quietly in respect, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The wedding planner stood at the side, her eyes wide, but her expression calm, as if to remind everyone that the show must go on. The officiant cleared his throat, prepared to proceed with whatever ceremony would follow. Emma's steps carried her closer to the altar, where the flowers bloomed brightly despite the tension in the air. Each movement felt surreal, a scene from a movie she never wanted to star in. Yet here she was, the lead in a story no one could have predicted. The guests watched Emma's face closely. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, but her eyes held a storm of emotions, disbelief, sorrow, and above all, courage. She was trying to hold herself together, to appear composed for their sake. The silence stretched, almost unbearable, as she finally reached the spot where the groom should have been standing. She looked out at the crowd, a flicker of vulnerability flashing across her face before she squared her shoulders and took a deep breath. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if time itself had paused to witness this unexpected moment of strength. Emma's gaze drifted toward the open doorway behind her, half expecting Mark to appear at any second. But the doorway remained empty. The crowd's whispered questions grew louder. Was this the end of a dream? Was the wedding truly over before it began? Just as the tension reached its peak, a few guests shifted in their seats, eyes darting to the side as if sensing something in the air. But Emma stood firm. The bride who had planned for a perfect day now faced an uncertain future, alone. Yet in that solitude, something remarkable was quietly unfolding. The room held its breath, waiting for the next moment to arrive, not knowing that this day's story was far from over. The morning had started like any other, with sunlight filtering gently through the curtains and the hum of excitement buzzing in the air. Emma had woken early, filled with a kind of nervous joy only a bride-to-be could understand. But as the hours passed, the excitement turned to worry. Mark, her fiancé, was nowhere to be found. His phone went straight to voicemail, and every message she left was met with silence. Friends and family tried to reassure her, but the knot of unease tightened inside her chest. As minutes turned into hours, the reality began to sink in. Mark had disappeared without explanation, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and broken promises. His absence was a mystery that no one could solve. The wedding planner, usually calm and collected, paced nervously in the back room. Emma's mother gripped her hand tightly, whispering words of comfort that sounded hollow even to her own ears. The guests arrived, dressed and ready to celebrate, only to find the groom missing from his own wedding. Emma's mind raced. Had something happened to Mark? Was he scared? Angry? Or was this a choice he made to walk away from their future? The uncertainty was a cruel torment. But with every passing moment, Emma realized that the answers might never come. She faced a painful truth. She had to decide whether to cancel the ceremony or face the crowd alone. Despite the heartache, Emma chose courage. She refused to let the day be defined by Mark's absence. She dressed in her wedding gown, feeling the heavy fabric settle around her like a shield. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman determined not to be broken. Tears stung her eyes, but she wiped them away, knowing that the moment demanded strength. The decision wasn't easy. Relatives debated in hushed tones. Some urged her to call it off. Others encouraged her to go forward, for herself if not for anyone else. Emma listened but made no promises. In her heart, she knew that walking down the aisle alone was a statement, a declaration that she would not be undone by betrayal or abandonment. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the guests. Phones buzzed quietly in pockets. Social media updates hinted at drama. But inside the hall, the atmosphere was charged with a mix of sympathy and admiration. Emma's resilience became the unspoken story of the day. As the ceremony time approached, Emma's friends gathered around her. They offered smiles, whispered encouragement, and steady hands. The photographer adjusted his camera, ready to capture what would surely be a wedding unlike any other. And then, as the first notes of the bridal march filled the room, Emma stepped into the spotlight. Her walk down the aisle was slow and deliberate. Each step echoed in the hushed space, carrying the weight of the day's heartbreak and hope. Faces blurred around her, but her focus remained fixed on the altar, not where Mark should have stood, but where she would stand alone. Behind her veil, Emma's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet, finding strength in the delicate flowers. The empty space beside her was a painful reminder, but also a symbol of her unyielding resolve. In that moment, the crowd saw more than a bride abandoned. They saw a woman who chose dignity over despair, courage over defeat. And as she reached the front, the room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The groom's disappearance had left a void impossible to ignore. But Emma's decision to walk alone filled that space with something else, a powerful message of hope and resilience. The day had changed, but her story was far from over. The delicate veil covered Emma's face, but it couldn't hide the storm raging behind her eyes. The heavy silence in the room pressed down on her, each breath feeling like a battle against the weight of disappointment. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the bouquet tighter, the fragile flowers a stark contrast to the fierce courage she was summoning with every step. Around her, the guests sat frozen in place. Some faces showed sympathy, others disbelief. But all were captivated by the raw vulnerability and quiet strength Emma radiated. The reality of the moment was undeniable. This was no ordinary wedding. This was a test of resilience, and Emma was holding the spotlight alone. Memories flooded her mind. The laughter she and Mark had shared. The late-night talks about their future. The dreams that once seemed so certain now shattered into countless pieces. She thought of the promises he'd made, promises broken without a single word of explanation. The betrayal stung deeper than anyone could see, but Emma refused to let it define her. She remembered her mother's soft voice that morning, trying to keep her steady. Her best friend's reassuring smile just before she walked out. They were her anchors in a sea of uncertainty. Emma's heartbeat thundered in her ears, but with every step forward, she felt a small spark of strength flicker inside her. The room was filled with tension, but also with an unspoken respect. Emma was no longer just a bride. She was a symbol of courage. She realized that by simply continuing the ceremony, she was rewriting the story that fate had tried to write for her. As she reached the altar, her eyes scanned the faces of those gathered. Some looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Others had tears glistening quietly. But then, something shifted. A few guests started to nod in silent support, their faces softening. The atmosphere changed from one of shock to one of compassion. The officiant stepped forward, his voice steady and gentle. He spoke words that acknowledged the pain without ignoring the power of the moment. Emma listened closely, her heart aching but also swelling with pride. This was no longer just about a wedding. It was about resilience, about standing tall when everything seemed to fall apart. She took a deep breath and looked out over the crowd again. It was then she noticed the quiet stir in the back, a ripple moving through the stunned guests. Eyes turned toward the entrance as whispers grew louder. Emma's heart skipped, a flicker of hope stirring deep within her. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be Mark? Could he have returned? But then she saw him, a stranger, tall and confident, stepping forward with purpose. His presence was unexpected, yet strangely reassuring. The man's sharp suit and calm demeanor made it clear he was someone used to commanding attention. But in this moment, his focus was entirely on Emma. The guests were silent, the moment heavy with anticipation. Emma's breath caught as the stranger reached out a hand, offering something she hadn't expected, not just support, but a lifeline. The room held its breath, waiting to see if she would accept. For a moment, Emma hesitated. The pain, the uncertainty, the shock, all swirled inside her. But then, something inside her shifted. With a cautious but determined smile, she reached out and took the hand. The touch was steady and warm, grounding her in the midst of chaos. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The murmurs turned to applause, and a wave of relief and hope washed over the guests. Emma felt the weight on her shoulders lighten, replaced by a new sense of possibility. In that instant, the story changed. No longer was Emma the abandoned bride. She was a woman who refused to be defeated. The ceremony would go on, not as planned, but with a new chapter unfolding before everyone's eyes. The unexpected presence of the man in the crowd was about to turn heartbreak into something unforgettable. Emma's journey was far from over. But in that moment, she found a new kind of strength, one born from loss, courage, and the surprising kindness of a stranger stepping in when she needed it most. The man's presence was impossible to ignore. He moved confidently through the stunned guests, his steps measured but deliberate. Everyone's eyes followed him, a stranger to most, yet somehow familiar to a few. His tailored suit shimmered under the soft glow of the chandeliers, every detail immaculate, radiating a quiet power. This was James, a billionaire known for his success, but also for his elusive nature. Rarely seen at family events, his sudden appearance at Emma's wedding was both shocking and captivating. Emma's heart raced as James closed the distance between them. She had never imagined that someone like him would step forward on a day she thought was shattered beyond repair. His gaze met hers, calm, steady, and full of an unexpected kindness that seemed to cut through the despair. The room was so quiet you could hear the soft rustle of fabric as he extended his hand. The guests exchanged astonished glances. Who was this man? What was he doing here? And why was he stepping into a moment so fragile, so deeply personal? But despite the questions swirling in the air, no one dared interrupt. The weight of the moment held everyone captive. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she hesitated. The pain of abandonment was still fresh, the shock still raw. But in James' eyes, she saw no judgment, only genuine concern and unwavering support. His calm presence was a lifeline in a storm she hadn't expected to face alone. The room seemed to hold its breath as Emma finally reached out and took his arm. The touch was gentle, reassuring. It was as if a protective shield had wrapped around her, offering strength when she thought she had none left. The collective tension in the room shifted. What had been thick with sadness and confusion now held a glimmer of hope. James guided Emma with a quiet confidence, his arm a steady anchor as they began to walk down the aisle together. The guests watched in stunned silence, their shock slowly transforming into applause. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing a moment that would soon become legendary. The bride abandoned but not defeated, saved by an unexpected guardian stepping out from the crowd. As they moved forward, Emma's steps grew steadier. The fear that had gripped her all morning began to ebb away, replaced by a cautious optimism. James didn't speak much, but his presence said everything. He was there to protect her dignity, to remind her that even when plans crumble, there is still room for kindness and courage. The aisle stretched ahead, once a symbol of broken dreams, now a path toward something new and uncertain. Emma glanced at James, her eyes searching for answers in his steady gaze. He offered a small, reassuring smile. No promises, no grand declarations, just the silent promise that she wouldn't face the rest of the day alone. The guests, once silent, now whispered among themselves, their voices filled with admiration and awe. Emma's family looked on, some with tears glistening in their eyes, others nodding in quiet approval. Even the wedding planner allowed herself a small smile, relieved to see the ceremony move forward with dignity intact. The officiant cleared his throat, regaining his composure. The ceremony, though changed forever, was about to continue. James stood beside Emma, a quiet pillar of strength in a moment none would forget. The two of them, united by circumstance, began a new chapter together, one forged in unexpected courage and unplanned grace. Emma's heart still ached for what was lost, but as she looked at James, she realized that life's twists often bring surprises beyond our wildest dreams. The crowd watched, captivated by the unfolding story, a story not just about love and loss, but about resilience, compassion, and the power of stepping up when it matters most. In that moment, the wedding hall wasn't just a place of heartbreak. It was a place where hope was reborn, where strangers became allies, and where Emma found the strength to keep moving forward. The billionaire had stepped out from the crowd, not to steal the day, but to save it, and in doing so, changed everything. Emma's heart pounded as she took James's arm. The warmth of his touch was steady, grounding her in a moment that still felt surreal. Her fingers trembled slightly, but she held on, knowing this simple gesture was more than support. It was a lifeline. The murmurs around them faded into the background as the crowd's attention focused entirely on the unlikely pair moving forward. Step by step, they began the walk down the aisle together. Emma's gown whispered against the polished floor, a soft sound that echoed in the hushed room. Every eye was on her, some filled with sympathy, others with surprise, and a few with admiration. The man beside her, with his confident stride and calm presence, gave the moment an unexpected grace. James didn't speak as they moved forward, but his silence was comforting. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just a quiet assurance that Emma was not alone. For a woman who had imagined this day unfolding in a very different way, this steady presence was both a shock and a balm. Her mind raced with questions, but for now, she welcomed the calm. The guests whispered among themselves, their disbelief slowly giving way to awe. A few wiped away tears, others nodded approvingly. What began as a heartbreaking scene was becoming a testament to resilience, to the strength it takes to keep going when the future suddenly feels uncertain. As they neared the altar, Emma glanced up at James. His eyes met hers, warm and encouraging. No words were needed. The understanding passed between them was clear. He was there for her, not as a replacement, not as a savior, but as someone willing to stand by her side in a moment of vulnerability. The officiant cleared his throat, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle but firm as he addressed the room. "Today's ceremony may be unlike any we've seen before," he said, "but it reminds us that life is unpredictable. It challenges us, tests our courage, and often surprises us when we least expect it." Emma's breath caught as she listened. The words echoed her own thoughts, that even in pain there could be grace. The crowd watched closely, their collective emotions shifting from shock to something deeper, more hopeful. James offered a small smile, his hand still steady on Emma's arm. The connection between them wasn't romantic, at least not yet, but it was real. It was kindness in its purest form, a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength comes from unexpected places. Emma took a deep breath and stepped up to the altar. The empty space beside her was no longer a symbol of loss, but a silent tribute to her courage. She faced the guests, her voice steady as she spoke. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said softly. "But today I choose to move forward with strength, with hope, and with gratitude for those who stand with me." The room erupted in quiet applause, the sound filling the space with warmth. Tears glistened in many eyes, reflecting the depth of emotion in the room. Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the weight of fear, uncertainty, and loneliness. James stepped back slightly, giving her space, but remaining close enough to offer support if needed. The ceremony continued, transformed by the unexpected but powerful moment. The guests witnessed something rare, a story of resilience that transcended heartbreak and found light in the darkness. As the vows were spoken, Emma felt a calm settle over her. The day might not have unfolded as she imagined, but it was hers. And with James's quiet presence beside her, she knew she could face whatever came next. The ceremony ended not with the expected fairy tale, but with a powerful reminder. Life's most beautiful moments often come from its most unexpected twists. Emma's journey was far from over, but she had already taken the first brave step, walking down the aisle, not alone, but with someone who believed in her strength when she could barely find it herself. The ceremony moved forward in a way no one could have predicted. Emma stood at the altar with James by her side, a stranger who had stepped in when her world seemed to collapse. The guests watched, captivated by the transformation unfolding before their eyes, a moment that was no longer defined by loss, but by unexpected hope and strength. As the officiant began to speak, Emma's mind drifted back to how strange this moment felt. Just hours ago, she had been drowning in despair, questioning everything she thought she knew about love and trust. But now, standing here, she felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. The presence of James was like a steady hand reaching out in the dark, guiding her towards something new, something she hadn't thought possible. James, usually reserved and distant in the public eye, showed none of his usual detachment. Instead, he was quietly attentive, his eyes never leaving Emma. When she glanced at him, she saw sincerity, no pretense, no hidden agenda. It was as if fate had brought them together in this most unexpected way. The officiant's words echoed softly through the hall, reminding everyone present that life's true meaning lies not in perfection, but in resilience. Emma listened carefully, finding strength in the truth of those words. She realized that this day, despite everything, would be remembered not for the heartbreak, but for the courage it took to keep going. As the ceremony continued, Emma felt the weight of her grief start to lift. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in this moment, she embraced the possibility of new beginnings. The guests, too, seemed to share in that feeling. Their expressions softened, and a quiet energy of hope filled the room. When it came time for Emma to speak her vows, she took a deep breath. The words she had planned to say to Mark felt distant and meaningless now. Instead, she spoke from her heart, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Today I stand here not because life has been easy, but because I choose to believe in strength and kindness, she said. I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I promise to face it with courage and an open heart. James stood beside her silently, his presence a comforting reminder that sometimes the greatest support comes from the most unexpected places. The guests listened in respectful silence, moved by the honesty of Emma's words. The ceremony had become more than a wedding. It was a celebration of resilience and hope. After the vows, James offered a small smile and gently squeezed Emma's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes of understanding, respect, and a shared moment of humanity. The applause that followed was heartfelt, filled with genuine admiration for a woman who had turned pain into power. The reception that followed was unlike any other. The mood had shifted from sadness to something lighter, more hopeful. Guests mingled, sharing stories and quietly acknowledging the strength they had witnessed. Emma found herself smiling, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt all day. For the first time since morning, she allowed herself to hope again. James stayed close but respectful, engaging with family and friends with a quiet charm that won over even the most skeptical. His unexpected role in the day became the talk of the gathering, not as a scandal, but as a reminder that sometimes life's greatest moments come from the most surprising turns. As the evening wore on, Emma and James shared a few words alone. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people connected by an extraordinary day. Emma felt a spark of something she hadn't dared to hope for, the possibility of trust again. The night ended with a sense of closure, but also a new beginning. Emma knew her journey was far from over, but with James by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The stranger who had stepped out from the crowd had become a symbol of strength, kindness, and unexpected hope, a reminder that even in life's darkest moments, there is light waiting to be found. As the reception buzzed with cautious joy, Emma found herself stealing quiet moments with James. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, there was a calm in his presence that she hadn't expected. The man who had stepped in from the crowd wasn't just a stranger. He was someone who seemed to understand the weight of what she'd endured without needing explanations. Guests watched as their unlikely companionship grew. Some whispered in wonder, others with skepticism. But for Emma, James was becoming more than just a support at her wedding. He was a reminder that life's surprises could still hold kindness and possibility. His presence, steady and unassuming, began to chip away at the walls she'd built around her heart. The evening wore on, with laughter and tears intertwined. Old friends offered gentle hugs. Family members shared stories, and somewhere beneath the twinkling lights, Emma allowed herself to dream again. Her thoughts drifted to what might come next, a future rewritten by unexpected events. James, for his part, listened more than he spoke. When he did share a story, his voice was calm, revealing glimpses of a life behind the headlines, one filled with pressures few could imagine. Yet here he was, quietly choosing to be present for a woman he barely knew, offering strength when she needed it most. As the night deepened, Emma found herself drawn into conversations she never thought she'd have. With James by her side, she felt a confidence that surprised her. It was as if his steady presence gave her permission to hope again, to believe that happiness wasn't entirely out of reach. The guests began to see a different side of Emma, the woman who had faced heartbreak with grace, who refused to be defined by betrayal. Her resilience was inspiring, and with James's quiet support, that inspiration grew into something tangible, something real. Later, beneath a canopy of stars, Emma and James found themselves alone in a quiet corner of the garden. The noise of the reception faded, leaving space for a conversation that neither had anticipated but both welcomed. Words came slowly at first, tentative and careful, but soon opened into something honest and raw. Emma spoke of the pain she'd carried all day, the confusion, the loneliness, the sting of being left behind. James listened without interruption, his gaze steady and kind. When he finally spoke, his words carried weight. "Life can be cruel," he said softly, "but it can also surprise us with moments like this, moments that remind us we're never truly alone." His words resonated deeply. Emma realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a connection neither of them had expected. The vulnerability she felt was no longer a burden, but a bridge, a path toward something new. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their lives, hopes, and fears. In James, Emma found a listener, a confidant, and perhaps the first genuine companion she had since Mark's disappearance. The walls around her heart softened, and with each passing moment, the possibility of healing grew stronger. As dawn approached, Emma felt a shift within herself, a quiet but undeniable change. The pain of the past hadn't vanished, but it no longer held her captive. With James beside her, she was ready to face whatever came next. The wedding, once overshadowed by heartbreak, had transformed into a turning point, a story of unexpected friendship, resilience, and the courage to embrace life's uncertainties. Emma's journey was far from over, but now, for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful. And somewhere deep inside, she wondered what future moments awaited her, moments where love, trust, and new beginnings might just find their way back into her life. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind, yet amidst the chaos, Emma found a surprising calm. Life had thrown her into a story she never imagined, but with James by her side, the uncertainty didn't feel quite so frightening. Each morning she woke with a quiet hope, wondering what new possibilities the day might bring. Friends and family reached out, some with words of encouragement, others with cautious curiosity. They wanted to know more about the mysterious man who had stepped in at the altar, changing the course of Emma's day and perhaps her life. James was a figure of intrigue, yet he remained humble, never seeking the spotlight. He had simply acted out of kindness, and that genuine nature endeared him to those around Emma. The two of them spent time together, exploring a tentative friendship that was growing into something deeper. They shared laughter, stories, and moments of silence that spoke volumes. Emma began to see past the billionaire's reputation, discovering a man who was thoughtful, grounded, and unexpectedly kind. But life, as always, remained unpredictable. One afternoon, while Emma and James were walking through a quiet park, her phone buzzed with a message that sent a shiver through her. It was from Mark, the man who had abandoned her on the most important day of her life. The message was brief and cryptic, hinting at regrets and a need to talk. Emma's heart raced. Old wounds flared, but alongside the pain was a growing sense of clarity. She wasn't the same woman who had waited alone at the altar. She had faced heartbreak, found strength, and experienced kindness when she least expected it. This message was a test. Would she fall back into old patterns or stand firm in the new path she was carving? She looked at James, his steady gaze offering silent support. Together, they decided she would face the past head-on. The confrontation was difficult, filled with raw emotions and hard truths. Mark apologized, admitting mistakes and acknowledging the pain he caused. But Emma knew forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, and moving forward didn't mean looking back. As the conversation ended, Emma felt a weight lift. She had closure, not because the past was erased, but because she had chosen to honor her own worth. The experience had changed her, strengthened her, and prepared her for what was to come. James was there through it all, a quiet presence who never pushed but always stood by her side. Their bond deepened, built on trust and mutual respect. Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't thought possible, embracing the idea that love could be gentle, patient, and real. Months passed, and with each day, Emma's confidence grew. The once painful memory of walking down the aisle alone transformed into a powerful story of resilience. She shared her journey openly, inspiring others who had faced similar heartbreaks. Her story was no longer about abandonment, but about courage, healing, and the unexpected ways life can surprise us. One evening, under a sky painted with stars, James took Emma's hand and smiled. There was no grand gesture, no pressure, just a simple moment filled with promise. Emma realized that the stranger who had stepped out from the crowd was now someone she could truly count on. Their story wasn't perfect. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, filled with challenges, growth, and the beautiful uncertainty of a future yet to be written. Emma's journey had taught her that sometimes the greatest love stories begin not with certainty, but with courage and the willingness to trust again. And so, as the night embraced them, Emma and James faced forward together. Two souls connected by fate, ready to write the next chapter. One filled with hope, resilience, and the quiet power of unexpected kindness.